Yeah, around Monday when I'm doing that funeral?
I will be.
Okay, good. Just in case there's a problem. Thanks a lot. Where are you?
On mine,
Oh,
I'm
there
right
you
next
are. Okay. So, yeah, okay, so great. And I'll talk to you another time about what I'm doing, my class and stuff. I don't want it on YouTube and things like that. I want to be able to see who's watching.
Okay, well, you're live right now, so we'll talk about that later.
Okay, dear. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay.
Good morning.
I'm doing that.
Rabbi.
Good
Hey.
morning, Rabbi Jim.
I love your faces. I love your faces. Just for a moment, go like this. Oh, yeah, faces. I wrote a piece called Faces. You know why? Because I love your faces. I don't get to see them enough. Let me go get my phone in case somebody tries to message me that way while we're doing this. I'll be right back.
How's everybody doing?
Wonderful.
Good.
Wonderful. Alive.
And it could always get better.
That's right. This too shall pass, right?
Yeah. Patty, I can only see you from the nose up. Oh, there you are.
Okay. Sweet. Let me see. Oh. Faces, I love your faces. They give me graces in the morning when I don't see anyone all day. I love your faces. It gives me graces that I am missing throughout the day. Now it's time for Torah and faces, faces, and your book. וערב נא אדוני אלוהינו את דברי תורתך בפינו ובפי עמך בית ישראל, ונהיה אנחנו וצאצאינו וצאצאי עמך בית ישראל, כולנו יודעי שמך ולומדי תורתך לשמה. ברוך אתה אדוני המלמד תורה לעמו ישראל. Amen.
Amen.
O God, make the words of your Torah pleasant on our lips and on the lips of all of those that come into our circle, so that we can spend a time in learning for the pure pleasure of it. Blessed are you who teaches to your people in this fashion. Amen. Okay. Oh, there's a chat here. Hold on a second. Let's see what that's about. Shane Punham. Okay, there we go. Okay, we're hello. Good morning. Shabbat shalom.
Shalom.
What is this? We're on Parshat Shmini. which is like Leviticus, what, 10 maybe?
9.
Leviticus 9?
I believe so.
And 10.
Shmini. It's rich. It's a rich one, that's for sure.
Through 1141.
Shmini.
Shemini? Is that it?
Yes.
Leviticus 9:1
Leviticus 9:1.
to 1140 something.
Let's see. Para.
So it holds the center point of Torah, Leviticus 10:16.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, and that's right in the middle of something very interesting too. Yeah. So let's see. ויהי ביום השמיני קרא משה לאהרון ולבניו ולזקני ישראל. ויאמר אהרון, קח לך עגל מן הבקר לחטאת, ויעיל יולד תמימים ויקרב לפני אדוני. אל בני ישראל תדבר לאמור, קחו שעיר עזים לחטאת, ועגל וחרס פני שנה. תמימים לעולה, ושור ויעיל לשלמים. There's oh, here it is. Umincha balula vashaman. And in the midst of right in the beginning there, talking about the offerings that are brought, it has this very beautiful thing. And in verse 4, you get to the mincha balula bashemen, which is the mincha is a grain offering, you know, in the midst of all these animal offerings. We have a grain offering mixed with oil, and it's a common offering in the list of offerings, but it's not one which we connect to in the Levitical category. But it's so it's in our tradition, we have an interesting way of attaching beauty in unexpected ways to text and unexpected texts. This is a good example. You have something as in the Levitical system as common as mincha balula bashemen. But if you think about, if you take it and let it roll around in your mouth, mincha belula vashemen, mincha belula vashemen, mincha, the offering, belula, mixed up with vashemen, oil. So we have this song I learned 1,000 years ago that stuck in my head because it's this song. Mincha, belula v'shemen, mincha, belula v'shemen, shnei Yisronim solet, mincha, belula v'shemen, mincha, belula v'shemen, mincha, belula v'shemen, shnei Yisronim solet, שעיר עזים לחטאת, מנחה ולולה ושמן, מנחה ולולה ושמן, מנחה ולולה ושמן. I love this precisely because, number one, I remember it after 100 years. It's in my head like peanut butter. Secondly, I love this because it practices the principle to me, in good writing that attaches something unexpected and beautiful to something that you think is common and ordinary and pedestrian and familiar, more familiar. So for example, another good example is during the Pesach we just finished. We have 1,000 tunes for 1,000 texts in the course of the Haggadah, course of the Seder. And for me, my favorite one is on the most perpendicular text that we have, which is basically a midrash about the appearance of twos, and then it evolves into the plagues. And it's a most extraordinary melody for a very kind of literalistic approach to a text. And it is the most beautiful melody that I know for the whole Pesach season. And it's attached to a text you would never, ever imagine that somebody would sit down and work this text with such a melody. And this combination of elements is a lot, personally, what guides me in a lot of writing that I do, to be able to attach something that is extraordinary to something that is familiar, and it takes the familiar into another realm. And the mix of those two, like the creation of a pictogram, creates something entirely separate than what the elements are. Uve muftim ze hadam kimo shnema shnatati mufetim bashamayim uva aretz dam va'esh v'timerot ashad davar acher biyad chazaka shitayim uvizroa nituya shitayim uvamora gadu shitayim. These are the 10 plagues. Shevi Akadosh Baruch Hu, that Akadosh Baruch Hu al hamitzrim, on the Egyptians b'mitzrayim, ve'elu hein dam but tzifadeya. You think I'll ever forget the plagues knowing that song? Never. That's another element of that principle, is that when it's attached to text, you will not forget the text. And this is why our texts are chanted originally. This is why the Homeric poems were brought down by a singer with an instrument, a simple instrument, and why the Torah was probably given over in its original forms in the same way, with a simple something in the background and a melody attached to them. For not only does it beautify, it gives it sustaining memory power, and it also helps the singer of tales in memory. It increases memory. So let's get to the text. There's a lot of stuff to talk about in this text. I'm going to bring up my, in my teaching, over the years, it always changes. It changes depending on where I'm at and what's gone down in my life and what the students bring who I'm teaching, what the dialogue brings. And it's my practice that I always go back after such teachings, after such dialogical moments, and I write down what I learned. So I compile these things, so I have a chapter on each portion, and that's what I'm going to bring up here. And it evolves over the years. Otherwise, you'd get bored doing it. if you're teaching it, it has to renew, you know, it has to change. It changes with the. So let's see what we got here. Can you see that? Yeah. Sweet. Okay, I have to admit a few people, excuse me. Okay. So let's see what we have. Those of you who were in my Wednesday night session a couple weeks ago will recognize some of this. That was a surprise to me, actually, that the proximity of this piece from the Zohar. I guess people keep coming in. This proximity of what we taught one night in the Wednesday night session, I mentioned that I had done I made up a meditation many years ago based on staring into what I thought was based on staring into a candle. From the Zohar, I was reading a piece in the Zohar, the classic text of Jewish mysticism. And there was a long piece about darkness and light and the relation of darkness and light and the components of light. It's a really interesting piece. And I was reading it and it seemed to me that the context of it, the setting of it was staring into a candle, that somebody was staring into a candle and using the wick and the flame, the fire of the candle as imagery for getting at some very heavy notions. So I just happened to mention this in passing on Wednesday night, and the class said, oh, and already we had, of course, entered the era of this form of dialogue. And the class said, oh, we got to do that. Please bring that. I don't think I'd ever taught it in all these years. And I probably wrote it up 30 years ago, 40 years ago. I said, okay, I'll get it out. So I got it out. Next class, I said, bring a candle. And, you know, we're in a new era here. I said, okay. I usually teach pretty heady stuff from text. This was a different concept. But this is what the people in the class said, yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. And I realized at that moment that we were in a different zone now. So I began to adjust my teaching stuff, you know, like it was a different zone. And the way I described it was, I wrote a piece about it in a way for my colleagues, and I put it online. The way I described it was, my teachings had become more embodied. Does that make sense? More embodied. And the next session, actually, we did a similar thing with a matzah. But we did it and ate it, you know, fancying the psalm, taste and see that God is good. You know that song, taste and see. All the senses, more embodied in the senses. And I realized, okay, this is a different era now. We're in a different place. So this piece here comes from, what's happening here is that Aaron is entrusted with the managing of the rite, the R-I-T-E, of the Mishkan, the sanctuary. Mishkan, Shekhinah, same root. Mishkan, Shekhinah. And Kedusha, holiness, Hakadosh Baruch Hu, the holy and blessed one. We have here one of the central dyads of our spiritual life, the dyad of Shekhinah and Hakadosh Baruch Hu, of Kadosh and Mishkan, of Shechina, shachein, to be embodied within, to be contained within, embodied. And Hakadosh Baruch Hu, Kedusha, some sense of awesome in the sense of awe in a sense of separation, like that sense of awe, separation. A dyadic concept of holiness and sacred and spirit life that are integrated together in this holy spiritual dyad, to be embodied within and to be distanced in a sense and separate and awed by what you are experiencing. Two concepts, they are complementary. They belong together, but they are complementary concepts. They're and concepts. And they need each other. And I realized that we had entered the phase here of more Shekhinah teaching, more Mishkan teaching, more of that aspect of embodiment that dwells within that root, Shechein, to dwell within. And that's where I have made my attempt to respond to the new conditions of this kind of dialogue, to bring the teachings inside more. So in this case, we're talking about Aaron. Aaron, the holder, the presider over the rite. Now, there's a lot of interesting things you can say about the rite, the Levitical rites. You know, it's what we begin with as children. A child begins the study of the book with Leviticus, with Vayikra. And the greatest of the Darshanim, the Sifrei Drush, the books of Drush, the books of interpretation of the Torah, all of the most respected ones are about Leviticus. And my teacher, I packed him up before he left the country and went to Israel. He wanted to spend a full year in Israel before he passed, and that's about what he got for one whole cycle. I packed him up, and when I was packing him up, he was living on the parking lot of the Galleria. Remember when it used to have houses there? He was living in that neighborhood. So I went there, we packed him up in the summertime, and he had shelves and shelves of Sifrei Drush, these books of drasha, these books of commentary. And I asked him, he didn't want to take them with him. I said, what are these? What is this literature? I didn't really know it. I know Jewish books pretty well, but I wasn't familiar with these books that he had. He said, oh, it's Drush, it's drasha. It's all about Vayikra. It's all about Leviticus, because the greatest of the Darshanim, the greatest of the commentators, could work the lessons of Leviticus. That was the greatest stretch of the imagination, was to make this material alive. But, I remember my other teacher, that was Dr. Fish, by the way. I remember my other teacher, Dr. Petakowski, of blessed memory at Hebrew Union College, a great, what he called a theologian, though on the first day of class, he reminded us that theology is storytelling for adults. He said that that the only authentic critique of the book of Leviticus can come from the vegetarian. Now, Dr. P had a way of going a long way to make a joke. And in his vocabulary, that constituted a joke. And what was behind that joke was a big teaching. This was also in his vocabulary, is that he rarely gave over any language that did not have a significant teaching attached to it. So what he was getting at was moderns, contemporary people of their own mind, so to speak, always have a critique of Leviticus, but it's not authentic because it's from such an era that is so removed, or such an experience that is so removed from our own experience, that we have to dislodge ourselves from our own perspective and try to understand the offerings of Vayikra as inviting God to sit at your table and to join you in a meal, that kind of thing. And what he was saying was, well, if you're a vegetarian, you have an obvious critique because most of the offerings are of animals, except for, of course, mincha, belulav Hashem, except for that. So from the vegetarian, you can make an honest critique, but everybody else has to be careful. You have to be careful and recognize your own limitation of displacing your perspective. And don't be too eager to categorize what you're studying unless you have the skill to turn that eye of drasha, of commentary, of explanation, and pulling out of Vayikra the lessons that are meaningful in your experience. And then one last thing about that. When Dr. Fish, when he had moved to Israel, he still sent me Gemoras in the mail. He would send me a page of the Talmud that we had been studying Talmud together for years. He was retired here. He kind of started Jewish education, the Bureau of Jewish Education here in St. Louis. And he was really a brilliant, remarkable mind, remarkable person. When I arrived here, he was already retired, but he was trained in Europe, and he came to our rabbinical meetings. He was the only, in those days, I think he was the only Orthodox rabbi, traditionally trained rabbi that came to our meetings. So he would come to our meetings, and I figured he was so full of information and knowledge. Though he was retired, I figured he was busy as can be. So, but one day, every so often, he would say beautiful things in our meetings. And one day I happened to walk out with him, and I said, I would love to learn from somebody like you, but I know you must be busy. A lot of people must ask you that. And he says to me, nobody asks me, nobody, ever. I said, really? He says, yeah. So I said, well, would you teach me? He says, of course. You'll pick me up on what would be the future parking lot of the celebrated Galleria. You'll pick me up, we'll go to the best library in town, and we'll learn once a week. So in those days, Hillel had a good Jewish library. So I would pick him up, we'd go to Hillel, we'd range, we'd graze through that library. When he taught something, he taught from 4, 5, 6 languages. He would pull this text, pull that text, pull this text. So when he moved to Israel, he would send me Gemoras that he had Xerox, and he would annotate, notate in the columns. It was so dear. And he sent me the last Gemara that he studied in his yeshiva in, where was he then? He may have been in Germany, actually. There were 5 students left. It was 1939. And he sent me they were holding out because they were trying to decide whether their presence there was necessary for who remained in that place. And the last Gemara that they studied, he sent me that text, and it was a text that drew out the lesson of what makes an animal treif. and what exactly that is corrupted inside an animal that can make the whole animal treif and unredeemable. And with that Gemara, when they studied that, they all decided to leave and they bought their way out. And he mentioned to me, this is the pinnacle of what we do with this material. We derive, it's a guidebook to derive the highest and deepest and most difficult lessons of our living. And that's one of the last Gemaras he sent me. So that's what you apply to this material, that kind of skill of imagination and interpretation. Yeah, Dale?
So thank you for the drashot, the drasha. There's a piece of text in today's portion that says darosh darash, that Moses needed to seek deeply. And so I think we're still here in the 21st century because some of us really go excavating week by week, and it's never the same because we're not the same, as you said. But the idea is that I don't have to be a vegetarian in order to try and build that connection to what those offerings were. And but I do have to commit to what Reb Shefa says, the sobriety of doing it. You know, the seriousness and the discipline and the ability to see everything through veils. And sometimes it's light and sometimes it's words. But I think Darosh Darash is really one of the key words in today's portion. To look deeply, to discern.
Anybody else before we continue? I don't see all your faces, so you.
Why did they choose Aaron? Why did Moses choose Aaron if it wasn't for nepotism? That might be some.
He's his brother, and they also were complementary forces. As I described, Kedusha and Shekhinah, Moses and Aaron were also complementary. The priestliness and the prophetic, they also complement each other. They are different, but they belong together. Now, to extend the metaphor from my teacher, of course, it was a joke. He didn't really mean you had to be a vegetarian. It was an irony. But what he was speaking was that complementary quality of Aaron brings the right, the doing, the priestliness, you know, the abstract in action. Yeah, that's good. The abstract in action. And Moses brings the prophetic, the language, the words, he who did not have good language, but the calling, the prophetic, the divinely ordained, the mouthpiece of godliness, so to speak, as it were, as if you could say. And they belong together. They're brothers. They're the ultimate complementary notions. So it's interesting because we could spend a lot of time talking about what appears as the prophetic and what appears as the right, the avoda, the doing of it, you know, and they need each other. The priestliness, I think, is much misunderstood and under-acknowledged. You have to work a little bit harder to get the priestliness, but I can tell you, I won't tell you too much because it'll take too much time, but I can tell you from my work, in my profession, in my experience, the priestliness has been an exceedingly important part of that dyad. The rite of it, R-I-T-E. And that's what we're in now. We're knee deep in it. So let's take a look. Anybody else, by the way? I don't see your faces, so yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay, this is a picture
of two chays
Oh, where are you?
right here that I got in Israel, and it's something you taught me. The print and the white material between the words. And this is supposed to represent the Torah and what's between the words. So it's the letter in black and white. I don't know if that'll add to anything or.
That's awesome.
Hold on a second. I don't see it. So
Can you see?
wait a second.
Can you see the picture I'm holding?
Hold on one second. I got to get out of this. I'm in this other thing here. I'm in this other thing here, man.
Two heads.
Hold on a second. Don't go anywhere. Oh, here we are. Okay.
Torah in black and white.
Where the hell are you?
That is awesome.
Oh, there you are. Is that you, John, talking?
Me.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
That is so cool.
This is from Safat.
Yeah, yeah. Everybody, y'all seen that?
No.
Well, not everybody sees it, John, but we got here, we have, it's an interesting piece. It tries to depict visually that complementary nature. You have two hays, one's black, one's white.
Wow.
Black on white and white on black. And it also is working on the image, that image we have of black fire, of white, a black fire on white fire. You know that image?
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very strong image. It's playing with that image too, that it's all over fire. It's the black fire that we read that's set into the white fire. It's fire all over. So this fire brings us back to where we started. It's a great image for us of our language text. Okay, let's take a look. Anybody else?
I don't understand what you mean by fire.
Fire. Fire. It's a great spiritual image. Fire. F-I-R-E.
Enthusiasm. Don't you think it means enthusiasm?
Well, it means a lot of things. It's a good image. It's an image of the nature of a good metaphor is that it has valence. It has a lot of levels. But what we call our text is, when we refer to our text as black fire on white fire, we're trying to depict the nature of what is spoken and what is not spoken, what is written and what's in the right, in the white, what's in the black and what's in the white. And a lot of what's in the black is implied and extended by what's in the white. It's all over fire. But generally, we spend most of our time in the black fire. Who wrote on this? That's interesting. Two hays, Torah and black fire. How did that happen? Do you see that?
John, it's Marion. It took me a while to find your photo. Would you hold up the graphic again?
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
And hay is significant. You know, who's ever doing this, hay is significant in Kabbalistic lore for a number of reasons. Number one, hay is five. You see me? 5. So it represents that. Secondly, it has that little opening on the top that distinguishes it from what? If it didn't have that little opening, it would be a chet. Chet implies sin. Hay implies that opening, and hay is linked to tshuva, transformation in the Kabbalistic tradition. And the hay, why the hay is linked to transformation, it's tashuv the hay, teshuva, tashuv the hay, return the hay, bring the hay back. Why to bring the hay back? Because what distinguishes the hay is that little opening at the top. So we have here, it's sideways now, we have here a clue, now it's upside down. We have here a clue in form as well as in content. Does everybody understand that? It's a very important concept. It's a clue in form as well as content. Okay, let's look at the text.
The text, yes, the text.
We go back to fire, lighting the candles each day. This is Aaron, of course. Hold the flame upward, the fire flying, standing on the limestone steps, raising a fire tender of the flame, the soul lamp of God. Ner Hashem Nishmat Adam, from the Proverbs, the soul of a human being is the candle of God. Standing on the limestone steps, raising a fire tender of the flame, the soul, the lamp of God, souls on fire. Love all creatures and draw them near. Through you, she comes to rest. See the blue around the flame, space that may not be present. Blue, that's her. Sky blue like lapis, like the color of the sea, like the sky, like the color of the throne of glory. So she here is the Shekhinah. Commentary, this piece we're talking about, of course, the priestly line that runs through Aaron. And from a vote, we're taught about Aaron, something really beautiful. His metaphors are, his epithets. You know how they have epithets? Like in the Homeric poems, the owl-eyed, who was it? The owl-eyed Hera, was it? The owl-eyed Hera, the ox-eyed Hera, that's what it was. That kind of thing. And our metaphor, our epithet for Aaron was, he was a pursuer of peace, and he loved all creatures and brought them closer to God. This was Aaron who did that. And through the rite that he was responsible for, that aspect of the dyad, he, the priestly line, the avoda, the doing, the manipulation of rites, R-I-T-E-S. And all this stuff is rites, all that stuff. We would put on a tallis, we're in the line of Aaron. We light candles, we're in the line of Aaron. All of the avoda, all of the actions of holiness is in the line of Aaron. And this stuff about the blue is from the Midrash. The Midrash loves to connect metaphors outside of texts. So what's the blue like? Why is that blue so precious to us? Nowadays, the blue is hidden. Even in the Talmudic period, the blue was hidden. This precious blue that we stared at a fringe on our tallis. And what was it supposed to remind us of?
See?
The mitzvahs. But why? What is it about the blue that reminds us of the mitzvahs?
You have to look deeper.
It's a mystery. What's the connection between the mystery blue? Even by the time of the Talmud, we didn't know. The Talmud has a way of telling us this. It says the blue has disappeared. It comes up every 70 years.
You have to look deeper for it. You have to search behind the black.
Well,
Just
they
the
looked
literal.
deeper for many centuries, and these rabbis in Israel finally said they isolated it. You know, we always have this war between the literal and the metaphorical in our tradition.
It's exhausting.
So these rabbis went searching for it. They said, I think we can isolate this blue. Let's find it. So in the late 19th century, they determined that they isolated it. And they found it from the hints, the clues that were left in the Talmud and the Gemara, that there was a mollusk that washed up on the shores near Tyre in the north. And if you go up to Akko to this day, you'll see the little kids when the tide comes in and goes out in Akko in the north. They gather up the shells there, and from those shells, there's a gland. You squeeze that gland, and you get what those rabbis in the late 19th century, it took them a long time to isolate it, but they determined that this is the mystery blue. And you can read the story. It's a great story. Go to techelet.org. They have an organization now. Techelet is blue, TEKHELET.org. And they tell you the whole story of how they, I probably showed it to you. I used to carry it around. I bought it from them. I had it in a little bag. This blue, it's a really beautiful blue that comes from that mollusk.
Well, it's hard to imagine not being in a world where you can immediately get every color imaginable through technology or crayons or paints, but hundreds of years ago, those things were very, very rare and very, very valuable.
Well, of course, somebody also said, it's a metaphor too. Somebody mentioned it's not, is it the blue? Is it the literal blue? But this blue really pops for us. I mean, the blue became one of our most significant identifiable colors, and that's why the Israeli flag is blue.
Rabbi, the blue can cause a lot of anxiety and stress to people if they can't find it or they don't see it and they want to. It causes so much pressure.
Okay. All right.
I mean, if you try to understand, I don't know if that makes sense, but I mean, like with I guess that takes study where you try to just keep yourself centered, right?
Well, it's interesting to think about it in the sense that here's these guys in the late 19th century that they were so devoted to tracking this thing in their way. They figured there is a literal blue. It's elusive. The Talmud tells me it's elusive. It disappeared even by the time of the Talmud, but we can track it. And they tracked it, so they thought, in their way. And they're still selling that thing. And, you know, they're selling threads of blue to put on your taluses. And it's a beautiful blue. You should go look at it. You should. I wish I don't have it anymore. I gave it to somebody.
I mean, Rabbi Daniel said yesterday that, you know, there's two pockets where you have to, that you carry two pieces. There was a story where you carry two pieces of paper in each side of your suit pocket. And one side has where you're the center of the universe. And the other side has where you're a blip in the solar system. And it feels like to keep that balance is very challenging. Like when they pray to the golden calf, you realize the calf is someone submissive that follows its mother submissively. And the goat that they bought, the brazen goat, is something that's that's rebellious on instinct. So to manage those two things of a submissive calf and a brazen goat is exhausting and I think that's probably part of that introspection. Does that make sense? I don't know.
Yes, but you do understand that these are complementary concepts. They're ands, not either ors. And that story comes from two verses in the Psalms. The verses in the Psalms, it says that you are created just a little lower than the angels. And the other one is that you are dust and ashes. So which are you? You are both a human being. You are
How
both.
can you be both?
In the sense that you think you're everything, but in the reality of another look, you're really not. You're just another bozo on the bus. You're both, not either or. You are both. These are complementary concepts. They're dyads. It's a very important idea.
It's Bobby. Can I?
They intersect in the human being, but they're not either or concepts.
Jim?
That's what I'm saying. It's hard for people to understand. It's just hard to the continuum.
It's a continuum. It's not
so hard.
Kierkegaard. It's not either or.
Jim.
Who's that? Some voice?
Yeah, it's Bobby.
Hey, Bobby.
You hear me? Yeah, I want to interject to this thing. I guess it's by the person I was raised, but it's so simple to me. It means have self-esteem and be humble.
Exactly.
Right.
That's it. It's so simple.
That's correct. I think that's right.
Jim?
In a Musar sense, that's right. In an ethical sense, that's right.
Jim?
French Renee.
Okay. So starting when you began talking about it, the sacrifices as us having a meal with God, and I thought about that. I thought, how do you actually literally serve a meal to God? Well, you burn it. So the fire is central, and the fire is that magical thing that mediates between the material and the spiritual. You burn something, you turn it into energy, but it's also the mysterious thing that we really don't understand, the Big Bang that created the world. So every time you're sacrificing, you're recreating creation. And, at the beginning, you've got the blue of the firmaments, the blue of the sky, the blue of the waters below, and we're sort of sandwiched in between. But when you look at the blue of the flame, it's the blue that's at the center of it.
Oh, I think that's really, really good. It's a really good
That
reading.
is so cool. Thank you.
I think that's a really good read, and place of fire in it too is really excellent thought.
That's so neat. Thank you.
This is nowhere, it's Marion. This is nowhere near as lofty, but I do want to add it. Blue is a very mysterious thing. And there's a show I love called Radio Lab that did a whole story. It turns out that apparently linguistically, the color blue is a late invention in most languages, and that it doesn't appear anywhere in the Odyssey or the Iliad. And they have a whole, I'm not going to be able to recreate it, but if anybody's interested, they have a wonderful hour show on the color blue.
Yeah, I heard that show. That was really good.
Yeah.
Do you know the book, Blue? I think it's Maggie
No, I
Wilson.
don't.
Oh, it's a beautiful book. Blue. One time I'm sitting in a coffee house in New York by myself. Generally in New York City, people don't come up and sit next to you and start chatting. A woman comes in this coffee house, sits down at the table next to me, and looks at me and says, "I just read the most remarkable book." I said, "You picked the right person. What is it?" She said, "Blue." And she pulled out the book and gave it to me. It's like,
Come on.
60, 70 page book.
You're kidding. Someone random came up to you and gave you a book.
Not random. She was a person that walked into the coffee house.
But you didn't know her.
No. And she gave me this book, Blue, Maggie. It's a famous book. Somebody Google it. Tell me I got the author right. Blue. It's famous. Maggie.
Is it Jewish?
No. But it's about blue. It's all about blue.
Who's the author? Who's the author?
Maggie Nelson, I think. She's also well known.
What came up as Blue Book for car values?
The title is
Well,
And then Joni Mitchell wrote the song.
the title is Bluets. BL.
Oh yeah, that's it. Bluets. Right.
BL what?
BLUETS.
Is it Maggie Nelson? Yeah.
Maggie Nelson, Nelson.
Yeah. Read this book. It's a remarkable book. It's all about blue. Okay, let's go on. So, the scribal irregularities in the Torah that I always love. Will you indulge me a moment?
Question, Jim, question.
Who's that?
John.
Yeah.
Blue, we went so far off the text that I got to ask you, is blue mentioned in this text we're studying? Or is it just the side thing from our brains? The side path. Is it in the text in here?
It's in the flame of the flames. We were talking about the flame that raises the flame. And by the way, the language that's always used when you raise up fire in Leviticus is you raise it up, you lift it up.
It's in where it says, it's in the third verse. It says, when the brothers sold Joseph, it says, they thought that they could not endure without Moses or something to take his place. Therefore, Aaron brought a calf, which also follows its mother submissively. When the brothers sold Joseph, however, they signified a rebellious instinct, for they refused to accept Jacob's choice of Joseph as the leader of the family. They behaved like a brazen goat, so that the animal was atoned for their sin. So it's the complement of the calf they mention in this Torah part, and the goat, which is why I brought it up, because it's like you said, and it's not or, it's and. And I guess the fire, what you all said is it adds to the, you have to look,
Yes,
it ignites
Aaron
something
is the
to,
bringer of the fire. Aaron is in charge with raising the fire in all of these portions. Let's continue. We have a scribal irregularity in this text. It's, to me, always interesting. It's in chapter 11, verse 42. And there's also always there's always some giving over of you pay attention to the scribal irregularities in the text. Every Torah has to have this big vav written in verse 42. You must not eat a snake or a wormoid. This is too close to what we're dealing with now. That goes on its belly. See, these are things that we're required to stay away from. Oh my God. So something that goes on its belly. The word for belly here is gachon. The gachon is always written with a big vav. In every Torah, every scribe that learns how to write a Torah has to include these irregularities. And people who are into form as well as content, as delivering meaning, pay attention to these scribal irregularities. And a lot of them are vavs. A lot of them are vavs. And your text, if you're looking at it, probably has a little asterisk by it.
yeah.
And then it has a little note on it at the bottom, written very lightly. And they'll tell you it's a vav rabati, a large vav. And we're halfway through the Torah here. The text, the note tells you. So it's significant in a number of ways. People pay attention to it. So here's what I had to drash on it because it's the tradition. How many of the scribal irregularities of the Holy Torah invoke the and? Vav is and. Vav is also significant in its shape, in its form. It also, oh my God, it's 10 o'clock. Hold on, we got to finish.
That happened.
How many of the scribal irregularities of the Holy Torah? Well, let's just leave it there. The Vav, it's and. It connects the upper worlds to the lower worlds in form. It's a straight up and down light. We call it the Or Yashar, the straight, the direct light. And in content, it signifies the holy and that we've been talking about, A-N-D. The link, the elevated conjunction. I belong to you, you belong to me, we belong to God, God belongs to us, the integrative and. Let the pure come and occupy themselves with the pure. So said the wondrous Rav Asi when he described the principle of why we begin the study of the Torah with Leviticus. That was his principle. Let the pure come and occupy themselves with the pure. Now, if we would have continued on from here, let me just tell you where we would have gone. I would have told you a story about this time. When we read this portion, it's always around our most difficult memorials. The Holocaust, the Shoah Memorial, the Holocaust Memorial Day, the liberation of Bergen-Belsen, which was last week, April 15th. And it's always with this portion. And I would have told you a story that illustrates why the language of Holocaust Memorial and fire are connected in unsatisfactory ways for us in language. Holocaust is a difficult word for us because it's a translation, the Greek, of the Hebrew that is really not, it doesn't have much to do with being burnt up. It has to do with being lifted up. And Olah is completely incinerated, but the language is Olah we use, like Aliyah. The same, like as if the same language that I'll point out to you The generic term for bringing an offering in this book is korban. Korban does not mean a sacrifice. And korban is from a root that means to come close, to be near, to come close. So you see how inadequate the term sacrifice is for that generic term of bringing these offerings, korban, korbanot. And we return to where we started, the notion that my teacher's ironic joke that you want to critique Leviticus, I'll listen to you, vegetarian, but the rest of you better search yourselves for your skills of interpretation, because our limitation is our limitation. The text is the text. We work the text. And where do we begin? We begin with Leviticus. Why do we begin with Leviticus? Let the pure come and occupy themselves with the pure. There's some sort of purity here that requires the imagination to unlock, to make pop. Does that make sense?
Yes.
That was cool.
All right, kids, we've come to the end of our lesson. Let me see your faces. I'm going to turn this thing off here. Stop share. Okay. Ah, there we are. Look at those faces. Go like this.
Hey. Jimmy,
Yeah, man.
when you were, it's Bobby, when you were reading, your text,
Yeah, man.
you said, oh my God, it's 10 o'clock. I thought that's part of the text. It just went so smoothly.
Oh, yeah, that would be interesting. that may be how such texts are compiled. You don't know. In the Talmud, that happens. Oh my God, we're done.
And then somebody writes it down.
Yeah. All right, kids. Good Shabbos.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thanks for showing up.
It was wonderful.
I love your faces.
Everyone.
I love your faces.
Thank you.
Hey, Jim, who's doing service this morning? Do you know?
I don't know.
Okay.
I think it's Rabbi Akiva, but I'm not sure. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye.
Hey,